How do you negotiate and ratify the contract of your real estate deal? Well, once you have the letter of intent signed, that's an LOI, by both parties, it's time to draft the purchase and sales agreement. We call it the PSA. Now, typically, the seller's attorney will provide you with the first draft, but if you can negotiate so that your attorney provides it, that's even better. Now, regardless of which attorney provides a PSA, I'm going to cover some major terms that should be addressed in the contract. And stick around to hear the worst case scenario and how you can avoid it. Hey, I'm Michael Blanc. I'm a full-time entrepreneur, investor, and coach, and I am passionate about helping others become financially free in 1 to 3 years by investing in real estate. Through my investment company, Nighthawk Equity, I control over $300 million of real estate, and I've helped my students acquire over 14,000 units at the time of this recording. Now do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Let's do this. All right, I'm going to give you 3 priceless contract negotiation tips to keep you in control of the deal. Tip number 1, use days, not dates. Here's what I mean. Most contracts use dates to define important milestones, such as the day due diligence expires and when the closing is scheduled. But what if something happens that causes you or the other party to miss a particular date? It should push all subsequent dates following that date back, right? Right? But no, if your contract is written with hard dates, that's not going to happen. So let's say you negotiate that the seller is to deliver you a certified survey within the next 4 weeks. Also, the expiration of the due diligence period, you got 4 weeks, and they have to deliver something to you in that time period. And let's say the closing date is May 1. All right, so you got 75 days after ratifying the contract. Now, what happens if the seller doesn't deliver the survey to you? Would that likely automatically push back the closing date? No, it wouldn't, but it would certainly put it at risk, right? So which means that you still would need to close May 1, even if the delays were caused by the seller. Now, since you couldn't close May 1 because you didn't get stuff from the seller, you would be in default of the contract. And that might mean that you would lose your deposit. Not good, right? You want to be in control of everything, and relying on the seller is outside of your control sometimes. The solution to this problem is to use a number of days after an event occurs, instead of an absolute date on the calendar. So instead of saying you're going to close May 1, you could say that you would close 60 days after the expiration of the due diligence period, which are the 4 weeks from contract or the date you receive the survey. Okay, so if it takes if the seller 5 weeks to give you the survey, well, guess what? You got an automatic extension. So now the seller can drag their feet as long as they want to. You can continue controlling the property. You would never be in default because your closing date would be set back as well. So make sure you don't use absolute dates in your contract. Tip number 2 is to properly define the length of your due diligence period. This is similar to tip 1 in that it relates to the use of absolute versus relative time frames. But when buying a property, many investors make the mistake of defining their due diligence period in terms of just a number of days from the signing of the contract. Let's say the contract gives you 30 days for due diligence, but what if it takes the seller 14 days to deliver all of your due diligence documents that you requested? That means you only have 2 weeks to research your property. Can you complete your due diligence in the next 14 days? Well, probably not, nor should you have to, okay? So instead of defining due diligence as 30 days after contract ratification, which is the default that most attorneys put in there, define it as 30 days after receipt of all documentation. Then if the seller takes 2 weeks to deliver everything, well, you still have a full 30 days to complete due diligence. Tip number 3 is to include at least 1 contract extension. Remember that you want to stay in control of the transaction even if things happen that are out of your control. Let's say you agreed to closing 60 days after the expiration of the due diligence period. You follow tips 1 and 2, but now your bank, your lender, needs more time to complete the underwriting process. Now, 2 things can happen. You need the seller to give you an extension, which they may or may not grant you, or you're in default of the contract and you'll lose your deposit. Either option is undesirable. Instead, build in a 30-day extension option that you can exercise at your discretion, and you might have to pay for it. You might have to pay maybe a quarter or a 0.5% of the purchase price and put that in deposit into an escrow. It's an extension fee, okay? Most sellers won't mind if this is in your contract, but it can save you big time later on because a lot of times the lender takes a little longer than they said they would. And this will save you and keep you in control and in the deal. Now, interestingly, one of the major fears from newbie apartment entrepreneurs is that their offer gets accepted. I mean, it's a true thing. Oh my, what if my offer gets accepted? Especially if the entrepreneur hasn't raised all the money yet. And this fear stops a lot of new investors from making offer. So before moving on to the next milestone, which is performing due diligence, let me show you that you don't need to be afraid of getting your offer accepted. Don't be afraid of success. Susan was an enthusiastic student. She did what she was told and consistently analyzed deals and talked to potential investors. Yet for some reason, she wasn't making any offers, even though her analysis was sound. After a couple of coaching sessions, I asked her about this, and she said she wasn't making offers because she didn't have all of the money raised. She didn't want to make any offers because if it was accepted, she wouldn't be able to close the deal. I found that she wasn't the only one who felt this way, so I want to address this fear first with you right now. If you can't overcome this fear early on, you won't make any offers. And of course, if you don't make any offers, it's tough to close your first deal, right? So this fear of success keeps some newbie multifamily investors on the sidelines. They've been looking for deals while trying to raise money from private individuals. They come across a good deal but don't have all the funds committed yet, and they stop pursuing the deal because they're afraid. So this is a mistake for at least two reasons. These investors underestimate the value of a good, underwritten, and pre-negotiated deal. Especially these days, finding good multifamily deals is tough. So when you have a deal that you have at least verbal agreement from the seller on a number that makes sense, and you've used conservative underwriting, you have something of value. Even if you don't end up closing on a deal, there will be a long line of people who would die to get their hands on a deal like that. So here's the way I think about this. You should always walk through open doors until they close. In my 15 years of full-time investing, I have learned that the universe gives you the opportunities all the time. Many times we don't see them, or more frequently fail to take advantage of them because we're afraid. I have found that when we walk through the open door presented to us, magical things happen, things we never thought possible. Therefore, I'd like to share this rule with you. If a door opens that is aligned with your purpose and goals, you should keep walking through that door until it's permanently closed. Don't give up until then. I want to share with you something I call the worst case scenario exercise, because I think it might really help you if you're worried about your offers getting accepted and what can possibly happen. Because sometimes we fail to do something because we're afraid of what could happen, even if the likelihood of that happening is remote. And so one exercise I like to do when I'm afraid is to write down bad things that could happen if that fear were realized. I find that once I see the potential outcomes on paper, they don't seem that bad or not likely. And my fear becomes manageable to the point where I can continue taking action. So let's do that exercise for the following situation. But first, if you're enjoying this video, hit that subscribe button, please. Let's assume you found a 15-unit apartment building, analyzed it, and made an offer. The seller countered, so you sharpen your pencil and continue to negotiate a price that works. You find it's actually kind of a smoking hot deal. But you need about $250,000 in cash to close this deal, and you only have $50,000 in commitments. Now let's further assume that you choose to continue walking through the open door. You decide to submit a letter of intent. You're kind of biting your nails, right? If the time it takes to negotiate and sign the letter of intent, in that time, you have about 3 to 5 days, okay, while you're doing the letter of intent. So you got 3 to 5 extra days until that thing is signed, and during that time, you can call potential investors. So you kind of have an automatic 3 to 5 day extension. Now, you're also working on a plan B, which is to call other potential investors who might be able to partner with you or take the deal from you, right? You could partner with them, you can refer the deal or wholesale the deal, right? So you're calling your investors, and then you're calling some of your partners you've already been networking with. Hey, I got this deal, see what's going on, and it's kind of like your plan B, right? And so at the same time, you're calling brokers, property managers, and other professionals who might be able to put you in touch with owners of similar buildings, because these are possible partners. You've been networking at local RIAs or meetups. You've been on other sites like Bigger Pockets, and you've been networking at Dealmaker Mastermind, because you're only looking for people who already own multifamily buildings like this. All right, so this is going on while you're working on the letter of intent, and now 3 to 5 days later, you get the letter of intent signed. Okay, well, this is a big milestone, but now you have 7 business days to submit a purchase contract, typically a week, right? Now, getting the contract, so you have 7 days plus 7. Now, getting the contract ratified takes probably another 3 to 5 days easily, right? Because there's some back and forth between the attorneys. They have to redline stuff, otherwise they're not doing their job. So just on the PSA side, you now have an extra almost 2 weeks to raise money or find another buyer or partner. 2 weeks, okay. It's a lot longer. So now, let's say you have 21 days of due diligence, right? So as you sign the contract, and from that point forward, you have 21 days. This gives you at least an extra 2 weeks in addition to the 21 days to find money or another buyer. Now, Since submitted to the LOI, you've had almost an entire month now to raise the extra money or to find someone else who would assume the contract or partner with you. This is probably a lot more time than you realized. Now you have a good deal, right? And plenty of people are either looking for somewhere to put their cash or to buy a multifamily building that's been hard to find. Now, worst case, okay, here's like the worst case. If despite all these efforts, you fail to raise the money, or you fail to find a single person who wants the deal you've delivered to them on a silver platter, you can always exercise the due diligence termination clause in your contract. Just remember, you have 21 days to get out of the contract. So if you construct your contract correctly, you can terminate the contract for any reason before the due diligence period expires. Now, one thing I want to say about that, while you can exercise this clause for any reason whatsoever, I would caution you to either have a darn good reason, or at least to preserve the respect of the broker. Because you don't want to be known as the not closing person and wasting everyone's time. So be careful, but that is your worst case scenario, is exercising that termination clause. Okay, here's what we can learn from this worst case exercise. Because once you complete it, you can see that your worst case scenario isn't actually really that bad. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two is to keep moving forward through open doors until they're permanently closed. And I found time and time again that magical things happen when you keep doing that. Now that we have this out of the way, I hope you're making offers. And when you do, eventually one of them will get accepted. Now, if you're looking for help regarding this, if you're stuck with something, you're struggling with some kind of mindset or some limiting belief or something around that, then why don't you book a call with us? Go to themichaelblank.com/call. We have a variety of resources that will help you get unstuck, keep you moving forward, answers your questions, and we'd love to work with you on this. So call themichaelblank.com/call, schedule a call with us, and see how we can help you keep moving forward. All right, so once both parties have executed the PSA, the purchase and sales agreement, you're officially under contract. So now the real fun begins. All right, so if you're enjoying this video, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss the next steps to closing your first deal. Let me know your thoughts or questions in the comments below. I'm going to see you in the next video.